Welcome to Playwrights and Critics on Zoom, Getting Coffee, where we re-examine classic works through modern lenses on Zoom calls while enjoying a soothing cup of joe. Today, we're diving into topics like fractured family dynamics, colonial power, and queer resistance with none other than Shakespeare's The Tempest and Philip Osment's radical adaptation, This Island's Mine. Now, you may be wondering, isn't this show about playwrights too? Where is the playwright? Well, you're in for a treat. Joining me today is Philip Osment himself. Thank you for being here, Phil. Can I call you Phil? Oh, did we catch you at a bad time?
Bill is fine. Thank you very much. And no, don't worry. I have unlimited Wi-Fi at my spectacular five-star resort, so it's no bother. As you can tell, I'm a very busy lad, so I wouldn't mind hurrying this up. I have a massage at 3 and then drinks at 5. I can't say with who, but she's a highly acclaimed actress, but I'm delighted to work with her. Okay, fine. I'll give you a hint. Her name rhymes with Hennifer Coolidge, and she starred in a show loosely inspired by The Tempest.
Oh my goodness. Is she in White Lotus? I won't say anymore. That sounds absolutely splendid, as the Brits say. Sorry, I'm just so excited. Can't you tell? Now, Phil, I hope you're ready to dive right into your play, This Island's Mine, a piece often described as a queer post-colonial reimagining of Shakespeare's The Tempest. And today I'd love to focus on the family dynamics in both plays. Before we talk about characters and themes, tell me this. Why The Tempest? Is there any reason why you chose to adapt this specific play, set on a remote island, no less, into this particular modern socio-political climate?
Well, I've always looked at The Tempest as a play about power and exile. To see Prospero's domination over the island, and not to mention over Caliban and others as well, I immediately saw it as a metaphor that could easily translate itself into any era where oppression and marginalization exist. That's why this play is also so easily adaptable and why we still talk about it to this day. Its themes can carry on for centuries.
I totally get that. So, to substitute the magical island we see in Shakespeare's play, you've used London as a bridge to connect both stories.
Yes, exactly. England becomes both the island and the oppressor at the same time, which I thought would be really fitting to both stories. To go a step further, I also wanted to explore what it means to feel displaced in your own country, your own home. And this can range from the LGBTQ plus community to new migrants to many other marginalized communities. This play, at its core, is about navigating exile in an unstable home environment where even your home base is not safe for you.
I love that point. And speaking of exile, one thing that I found really interesting while reading your adaptation is the way that your characters tend to form new relationships and connections that become a substitute for their actual families. To name a few, I noticed Martin and Marianne, Solwyn and Mark, even Luke and Martin. These relationships, while giving each other having their own flaws, felt like safe anchors in the middle of this supposed island. Tell me about these choices you've made. Were they intentional?
I'm glad you've brought up these relationships. And yes, they were intentional. First of all, it's a little rude that you would even ask me if the choices I make in my writings are intentional. Of course they are. I don't just publish things without reading over them. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if I did that. Now would I?
Of course not. Of course not. Look, I'm not trying to offend you here. I'm just trying to get the ball rolling.
Okay, I'll just move on then. Anyways, in my play that I carefully wrote, thank you for that comment again, by the way, I really wanted to challenge the traditional notion of the nuclear family. This facade is something that Shakespeare loosely tried to reinforce with Prospero and Miranda. Instead, my characters form what you may know as chosen families, where these bonds of trust are built out of survival and a shared sense of belonging. People like the characters you've mentioned have gravitated toward each other for a reason, that the world around them has not been so inviting. Because of this, these characters have created these little pockets of serenity and refuge, which serve as helpful anchors despite the instability of their lives. Also, we cannot forget that my play is a response to the political climate of the time, as Margaret Thatcher's policies were deeply anti-LGBTQ+. That environment sort of slingshotted this notion that if the state was willingly not protecting you, you had to protect each other.
Wow, that's a really interesting point considering.
Sorry, I muted you. I just want to piggyback on the amazing point I just made. If Thatcher had it her way, people like me wouldn't exist. let alone thrive. But look at me now, flourishing, writing plays, giving interviews, having drinks with famous people. And yet, despite all of that, we still have these conversations about exile, belonging, and power today. It's exhausting, really, being ahead of one's time.
I can imagine. Speaking of being ahead of one's time, one of the things that I really liked about your play is the way that it blends different styles, seriousness, comedy, even moments that feel a little surreal. It's almost Shakespearean in how it moves between genres. It really had me reflecting on the different ways Shakespeare chose to write his play, as it blends tragedy and comedy as well. How did you approach balancing the complexity between multiple character dynamics, circumstances, and the overall tone?
What a good question. I'm starting to like you. To answer, I first want to say that I believe life itself is a mixture of these themes, and I felt that my play should be no different. I wanted it to reflect the real struggles that come with displacement, identity, and finding a sense of belonging. Shakespeare's play also reflects these themes, which we can clearly see with Prospero and Caliban, Ariel, and Miranda. Each of these characters are stuck due to Prospero's power and his struggle to achieve a sense of identity. I wanted to capture that same fluidity as the humor is meant to be seen as a comedic relief, as a way to maneuver difficult topics. This is something that lots of people do in their lives as well, as self deprecating humor helps individuals confront uncomfortable situations. With queer communities under Thatcher's government, these types of themes are incredibly prevalent, as there were a lot of limited opportunities for their community, and humor could definitely help navigate difficult situations that they were put in. One minute you're devastated, and the next you're laughing about something that's probably inappropriate. With that being said, it made sense to bring that Tempest ashore to London and into the lives of real world people to shed a light on this difficult time.
So, in a way, would the structure of your play itself also serve as a kind of resistance to the political climate at the time?
Yes, that's good. I mean, I'm good, obviously, because I wrote it, but that was a great point. It's a play about breaking down and merging different categories, sexuality, power structures. So, why should it adhere to the rigid confinements of traditional storytelling?
So well said, Bill. Your play also tackles ideas of identity and self-discovery in such a breathtaking way. Each character seems to be navigating their own journey of figuring out who they are and where they belong. Could you talk a little bit about how identity functions within this island's mind?
Identity is so important in my play. Every character you see is in some way navigating a world that really doesn't know what to do with them or how to place them in a specific hierarchical role. It really portrays that struggle for belonging and creating a new environment that ties these people together in the midst of an unstable world. It's something that Shakespeare had also confronted as well in his play. And I saw that in particular with Caliban and Ariel.
That's interesting. Could you tell me more about that?
Of course I can. With Caliban, he's reduced by Prospero into nothing more than an inconvenient monster who should be enslaved and controlled. And I think the way Prospero mocks Caliban's native tongue is especially important when we talk about identity because language is a form of power. And when you strip someone of their ability to speak on their own terms and take away aspects of their native heritage, you are also stripping them of their agency. There's this brilliant analysis in a book by Jane Forner called Postcolonial Perspective on Edison's The Tempest that describes how Caliban's voice is associated with incoherence and inhumanity, his mother tongue demeaned to the status of brutish gabbling, a langue barbare. And this is exactly my point. Prospero does not just rule over Caliban physically, he also mocks and undermines his very way of expressing himself, reducing his language and culture to something beastly. And this is something that colonizers have been doing for centuries to justify countless murders and genocides of marginalized communities. It's through this reinforced and embedded narrative of the other.
Right. So, what you're saying is that identity is not simply about existence, it's also about how someone is perceived by those in power when the narrative is altered.
Precisely. Now you're really getting it. But what I love about modern adaptations, including my own, of course, is that they push back against this erasure. The very title, This Island's Mine, comes specifically from a line in The Tempest, which in itself is meant to give Caliban a newfound sense of agency and shifts the narrative. More specifically, he says, This island's mine by Sycorax, my mother, which thou takest from me. Although he has this powerful declaration, he's still dominated by Prospero. However, in my play, we see different forms of resistance that echo this power struggle. For instance, there's a distinct conflict between Selwyn, who actually plays Caliban in a play, and a powerful white director, as I note that he's England's greatest playwright. As a Black actor, wanting to play Caliban through the post-colonial narrative, while its director wanted him to play Caliban the traditional way, reflects the original oppressive relationship between Caliban and Prospero.
Can I jump in on this point quickly? That moment in The Tempest where certain Caliban fully asserts his claim to the island truly does shift the conversation into the way we think about power and belonging, and it's fascinating how your play expands that idea. Sullivan's identity as a Black gay man is constantly redefined and constrained by external forces, whether that's the director of the play he's acting in or the broader racial and political structures of Thatcher's Britain. That reminds me, your play was originally staged at the Gay Sweatshop Theater Company. I think your message becomes even more powerful with this staging choice, as this theater was formed as a direct response to the oppression and misrepresentation of the LGBTQ plus community. Its entire purpose was to claim and reassert the gay community's identity and image in theater, which aligns so perfectly with your play's themes of resistance and self definition.
And that is exactly why it was the perfect home for my play. I think it served as a battleground that challenged the socio-political climate of its time, challenging those real-world power imbalances to create a space for those who've been historically silenced and marginalized. It provided a platform where LGBTQ plus stories were told from their actual community. This is why representation in these relationships matter, not just in content, but who actually gets to produce these narratives.
And in doing so, your adaptation reframes England itself as an island where identity is consistently resisted. It reminds me of something Catherine Silverstone wrote in her book, The Tempest, Philip Osment's This Island's Mine and Gay Sweatshop, where she says that your play appropriates Shakespeare to insist that the history and culture of this island, which Caliban shares with the play's audience as much as with its other characters, are not merely monolithic and exclusive, but are also composed of and belong to the diverse voices of the exiled, marginal, dispossessed, and oppositional individuals who populate it. That idea of resistance got me thinking about Prospero's role in The Tempest, as he's not just a father to Miranda, he is the architect of the entire play. By manipulating other characters to determine the fates of everyone around him, Shakespeare uses this narrative of fatherhood as an extension of colonial power. Prospero not only uses his magic, but his political authority too. Your play, however, really challenges this. It focuses on people typically excluded from power and uses transfocalization to shift the narrative to marginalized characters.
That's a brilliant observation, and I must say, you're really impressing me now. Prosper was a father, but not just biologically. He also has that godlike, controlling sense of power over others, and where he gets to decide everyone's futures at his will. And frankly, I was more interested in breaking down those structures rather than regurgitating them. We should be asking ourselves, what happens when we resist the notion that our identities are predetermined and dictated from larger forces?
So rather than reinforcing the idea of a dictator determining who belongs and who doesn't, your play decentralizes that power, shifting it to newer voices.
Yes. Wow. Am I that smart? It sounds better when you say it.
Thank you. Well, Phil, this has been an incredible conversation. It's clear that your play doesn't just retell the Tempest, it reclaims its narrative, giving voice to those historically silenced in history. Shakespeare's play presents power as something inherited and enforced onto others, while your adaptation takes the idea of that power, grounds it into Thatcher's Britain, and use it to shed light on those who are affected by these socio-political power dynamics on a daily basis.
Exactly. And that's why Shakespeare's still relevant today. By analyzing his works under a critical lens, we can challenge our understanding of history, identity, and family.
Well, I just finished my coffee, so I think this is a perfect note to end off on. Phil, it's been an absolute pleasure. I hope you enjoy your massage and drinks. Tell Jennifer I said hello.
Thanks for the coffee, by the way. Not my preferred blend, but it was satisfactory. And I'll tell her, but she doesn't even remember my name half the time. So, best of luck to you.
Oh, well, I guess that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in. Till next time.
Okay, hold on.